Approval of the minutes from April 27, 2021. Okay, motion first by Mayor Reardon, second by Councillor McKenzie. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carried. Item 1.2 is our Growing in St. John series, and we are fortunate enough to have Kamran Mohammed here from the CAM Institute, and we're going to call up Greg Cutler to give us an introduction, and just a reminder that we have 10 minutes to present. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll go quick so I don't cut into Cameron's time. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for Growing in St. John today. Kamran Mohammed is the CEO of both ICAR Digital and the Managing Director and co-owner of CAM Institute of Design, both here in St. John. Kamran comes with over 5 years of experience in advertising and design. As far as background, he co-founded ICAR in 2019, again in St. John, with an aim to provide unparalleled value and authenticity to local businesses through branding, 3D design, web and software development, and more. And he also co-founded CAM Institute the next year in 2020. CAM Institute is designed to prepare graduates to land real-world jobs. He's going to speak about that here in a moment. Cameron also holds a master's degree in Computer and Information Technology Administration. In addition, he is part of the prestigious Wallace McCain Institute. And if he has any downtime, he also enjoys playing cricket, which I should say is a growing sport in St. John as well. So with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to our guest speaker for the Growing in St. John series.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron. Thank you, Greg, for that introduction. And to the council and the mayor, thank you for having me. So I moved to Canada in 2014 with the hope that I can learn something new on the west side. And so I did my master's in Ontario. And one of my friends said, let's move to St. John, New Brunswick. There's an opportunity that we can do business and you can do something different. So I said, sure, Ontario is like really tight. There's an opportunity. Let's make that count. So I moved here in 2017 and I worked in an IT company for a year and a half. And I realized that I'm not a people's person. So what I did was I started my first company, ICAR Digital. In that, we provided some 3D rendering services. And in 2019, when we started, we got a lot of projects. We work with big clients like Rolls-Royce. We work in the future of the museum in Dubai. We have big clients we used to work with only outside Canada. And I realized that there's a need here. So we wanted to hire somebody who has the same caliber of the renderings that we did. And unfortunately, we realized that there's a big gap. So we recruited a lot of people, but we couldn't find the quality. So we decided that since we have the passion to create something new and make a change, so we started CAM Institute, which is a creative art multimedia. So I'm going to start a slide presentation to go overview what we're doing and how we're going to do this. So that's our logo. We aim to work with Hollywood. We aim to work with clients like Ford, Tesla. That's our aim, and we are currently designing cards and sketches for Ford and Tesla as we speak. And these are the courses that we're offering in our institute. There are two industries that we're going to target. One is the communication, and the other is industrial design. Communication is more about VFX animations, working with big banners. That's our aim. We don't believe in mediocre. And industrial design is about transportation design, about designing cars. So we do one-to-one scale clay models with cars. So before the car is ready into the market, they design that on a clay model. And then they make those changes on that clay model, and then that's sent to the factory, and they do the 3D scan, and they give it all over the world. So we have designed EV Raptor for Ford, and we have a potential lead with Tesla, and we got our first project here in St. John. So we're working on it. And we moved to a new location on Ross Avenue, the base engineering building. So these are the courses that we're offering. And so our team, we recruited about 18 faculties from all over the world. It's been a tough ride to get the right people on board. We convinced them. We went out, we showed them the videos of St. John. We convinced them this is the place where we needed to be. The reason why we did that is the support that we got from each individual. It would be biased that I'm not naming a lot of them, so I would include that in a nutshell. I invited the Mayor Donna to come to the facility. The support, the drive, the words that we received from them helped us to go forward with this. So we started our journey at Connection Works, and we moved within a year to that base engineering building. That is, the building is built by Henry Ford. That was the first workshop for them in St. John. That's where we're going to design in cars now. So I think it's a destiny for us to be here. And to add more to it, I'm just going to show some of the work because we're a design institute. We believe in visuals than more of talking. These are the individuals who have more than 20 years of experience. They work with some great banners, Game of Thrones, to you can name it. So they're coming here. So this is a digital matte painting opportunity for students when they graduate. They can work on occupation like this. We're bringing almost about 25 faculty in the span of 2 years, and we have their contract signed, and this is just the beginning for us. So one can make their cartoon characters for game designing. Not only that, tell me something that is not designed in today's time and how important design is. In fact, this building, we need design. So every element, we're going to teach students the importance of design, the hardcore fundamental of design. We are one of a kind that we are offering the services here in St. John, New Brunswick, and Atlantic region. Our aim is the students that we met from UNB, and they're quitting their education because the parent forced them to take something, but they have interest in something like this, and they don't have in this region. So they move to Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, or potentially be UK, because that's the hub. So now we're bringing them here and keeping the people here and making more jobs. So these are the game characters. You can just not design, animation or anything, but also games. Games is ever-evolving industry. It's a billion-dollar industry that is just growing and growing and growing. And we can imagine having somebody from St. John creating a game and getting at a global exposure. What makes us different from other people is the experience me and my business partner, Winston, has is over 40 countries that we have traveled. We are not just bringing the design, but also we are bringing the creative experience that we have and the clients that we have served over the past 15 years. And we have good contacts in India. We are also working on Netflix OTT platforms for designing. And these are the characters that one can make, as you can see on the slide. And these are the qualified, skillful people that we're bringing here in St. John, their families. So for example, this is how it's going to look like. High-end softwares like Houdini, Maya, 3D Max, is going to be teaching them here. So there's so many kind of effects that one can do, from creature to human to action movies. So to cut in short, this is a communication industry. It's just growing. People want to work from home. This job serves a purpose. They can work from here. The pandemic has taught us what the world can be like. So they can be here in St. John and work from anywhere. So this skill set is just not based on your, people. You need to have the quality and skill. That's what we're going to be teaching them here. And this all happened because the people that I met here in St. John and everybody that I can imagine who helped us to take that step from pedal to, economic growth, development, Envision St. John. So all these people, they collectively came forward and they support us throughout. And we really thank each one of you guys for making this happen. And we're here for a long run, and thank you for your support. I'm open for questions.
Thank you so much for your presentation day. I love hearing about the evolution of kind of going through Connection Works and then evolving out of there, which is, I know, the point of that organization. So it's very, very interesting. And it seems like you're going to attract a lot of really high skilled individuals to obviously work on these beautiful renderings and such. So thank you. Is there any questions from any of the committee? Councillor McKenzie?
Thank you. Thank you, Kamran, for coming in and enlightening us on this. This is amazing. Now, I'm sure you mentioned it, but just to remind me, how many people do you employ and how many actually came to St. John that you brought in?
So far, we one of the employees, she left from St. John. She moved to Calgary, and when we offered, she came back because this program that we are running, and that's her passion. So she quit her job in Calgary. She's coming. So far, we have got 6 employees,
Yeah.
and we just got AIPP approved. So we're bringing 18 faculties in the process.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Well, I can remember being in that building, I think just after he built his last car, maybe, but it used to be right next to a Quick Pick. Quick Pick used to be right next door to it, so we spent a lot of time out there as a kid. Anyway, great to have you in today, and thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was awesome to see you in person. Speaking with you on the phone a few a month ago, hearing about this was yeah, I was pretty excited. Has there been any changes, or I guess not changes, but has there been any new information that you've come across in the last 2 months around the school piece? So you have, there's a business case here, but then there's also an educational piece. And that educational piece could spin off into other industries, other startups, other things. Where is the potential there right now in your current facility on Rasay Ave? And correct me if I'm wrong, is that facility both home to some of the design pieces of the business and the school aspect, or is the school specifically online? Can you just...
Sure. Yeah. I think with the pandemic, we have learned a lot of things, and we realized that we need to have same thing as offline and online, the same level of priority. So we have things set up that we also have everything set up in terms of online for students to come in. And the change factor is they always ask what's next, right? So in the industry of education and the technology, we're aiming to provide AR and VR, which is augmented reality and virtual reality. For, let's say, if a doctor is in UK and there's a doctor in Canada, we are going to create a human anatomy of brain cells where they can operate there and here. We'll create objects so they can wear VR, and then they can kind of tell each other how this is going to work. So the change is ever evolving, and we're trying to stay up to date with the machineries that we were bringing here. It's a high-end machineries. It's over almost $1.3 million machineries that we're going to be bringing, because we have a big industry for interior design. So there's 2 industries, communication and industrial design. It revolves around interior design as well. So we are kind of focusing on having the right equipment that can last for the next 10 years for sure.
And how many students would you have?
So right now we have 5 students, and we are aiming to start a fresh batch from January 2022. We just got our college certificate accreditation with the New Brunswick done, and also we are hoping to get DLI where we can bring international students. And the funny thing is, not funny, but the serious thing is, I'm traveling to India on August 3rd to tie up a contract with one of the biggest colleges in India called MIT in Pune. So they have over 175 colleges, and they're sending 30 students every year as an exchange and a collaboration. And they're going to come here, 2 years course there and 2 years here, and they're going to be here working with us and getting jobs. And so not only faculty, also the student in the long run.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, take a motion to receive and file this report. Moved by Mayor Reardon, second by Brent Harris, Councillor Harris. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Any naysayers? Okay, motion carried. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you. Thank you, Council, for having me. Thank you.
All right, moving on to item 1.3, we have a growth committee orientation, and this is a verbal report. So this is Commissioner Jacqueline Hamilton, with support by Phil Ouellette.
Okay, good afternoon, members of committee. First of all, I want to say congratulations on your appointment to Growth Committee. Over the past 5 years, this committee has done a significant amount of work to really move the needle on growth. And on behalf of staff, we're pleased to work with you to move the agenda forward. So this morning will be, or this afternoon will be very high-level update on the operations of the Growth Committee, and I'll be sharing the presentation with Phil Ouellette. I'm going to start with just a bit of context on Growth Committee. Growth Committee is one of 3 standing committees of council, and it was created 5 years ago as really to pilot a new form of governance in St. John, and it really allows committee to sort of dive into to growth and accelerate growth outcomes and really work to promote and foster a growth mindset within the organization and the community. It is guided by a terms of reference, which you have in your orientation materials, and also a foundation of several leading edge growth strategies, which we did share with you, and we're going to be going through very quickly this afternoon. So in terms of the structure of the committee, there are 5 members, as you know, but all voting, including the chair. And the committee meets regularly on a monthly basis. Staff does work with the chair in setting the agenda for meetings, and really the intent is to reflect those priorities of council and the committee's work plan for the upcoming year in order to support the organization in achieving those growth outcomes. So I'm just going to touch briefly on the mandate of the committee. So really, in short, it's about driving sustainable growth outcomes and ensure that the city is positioned as a community of choice. And that's really balancing the urgency around growth with the longer term aspirations. So really very much focused on taking advantage of opportunity, but looking to the future. So in carrying out this work, the committee does provide recommendations to Common Council on growth-related programming. So it's not a decision-making committee per se, but the committee does play an important role in providing direction on growth opportunities and collaborating with the staff team around that, and does provide really value-added support to Council and on decisions related to growth outcomes. And there's a lot of heavy lifting you're going to find over the course of your term done at the Growth Committee table. So in pursuing this mandate, I'm just going to touch on really the 4 areas of focus for the committee. First of all, very much upholding evidence-based decision-making, so ensuring those decisions of council are considered in the context of the longer-term growth plans. And there is an incredible foundation of work that's already been done by Growth Committee and Council around growth strategies. Also to ensure really an efficient and effective effort to pursue development opportunities through our one-stop development shops. There's been a significant amount of work done by the committee in past to engage with industry, some of the key investors, to ensure that the experience through the one-stop shop is a seamless process. Also recommendations related to driving investment, where the city's investment goes in terms of economic development. So obviously the Finance Committee has the main mandate with respect to setting budgets, but the committee does provide important input on priorities with respect to economic development and growth. And the final area I'll touch on is just really the pursuit of opportunities. So obviously there are new opportunities that come up, and the committee does play a role in providing guidance on identifying growth opportunities. So we're going to dive into some of these later in the presentation. I did want to take the opportunity for your first committee meeting to introduce you to our collective growth team. You'll be engaging with many of our staff as you carry out your work. And I did want to mention that, at all of the meetings, there's a core growth team that you'll engage with that would include myself, the city manager, Amy Poffenroth, the director of permitting and development, and Phil Ouellette, who's our Director of Growth and Community Planning. We do have David Dobbelstein, our Manager of Growth, who will be at all meetings. He's off on a well-deserved vacation, but we do have Greg Cutler standing in for him today. And of course, the Clerk's Office, Kelly Tibbetts and Richard Evans, support the heavy lifting of the Growth Committee. Our extended growth team also includes our growth and community services senior management team, and we've invited them here today so you could put faces to names. And I'm just going to take a moment and introduce and just have them wave. So Carrie Smith is here, who oversees our customer service experience at our one-stop development shop. We have Chris McKeel down here, who's the manager of the community standards enforcement programs. We have Pamela Bentley, who oversees permitting and infrastructure service. Jennifer Kirchner at the back, who manages our community planning service. And Amy McLennan, who manages and oversees the work of our recreation and community development programs. And I know that our growth team does extend beyond just our own department, and you'll engage with various commissioners throughout your work. We also have at the back Ian Fogan, our Director of Strategic Affairs, who attends meetings on a regular basis. And our communications team, Lisa Casey is not here today, but Natalie Logan is with us to support the communications activity of the Growth Committee. So with that as an introduction, I'll hand things over to Phil Ouellette to take you through the presentation.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Jacqueline, and thank you for having us today. The rest of the presentation goes through a variety of different slides, and I'll try to go as fast as I can to give some time for questions afterwards. Also, I want to acknowledge that we don't want to necessarily recreate the council orientation, so there'll be some slides that we'll just say, listen, that's part of your package, please read up on it. The first one that I wanted to touch up on is the outcomes as it relates to growth. And believe it or not, this wasn't defined in our recent past. We knew that economic development was important, but we never as a municipality stood up and said, what do we want out of that? What do we want from that investment specifically? The economic development agencies would come to us and say, here's all the great things that we're doing, here's all the great outcomes, but we never did that as a municipality and said, this is what we want. So it might seem trivial or simple to do, but we did it. And there's three things: tax base, population growth, and employment growth, those three things. And once we established that, the next question was, well, which one do you start with? And that is a very complicated question in terms of the chicken or the egg. Is it employment growth that creates population that creates tax base, or is it that you build a bunch of new buildings and structures, and then people will come to it, and then employment creates? It's a variety of different options. So I'm not going to claim that there is the starting point with one. They all have their merit. It is important to note that for us, for our operating budget, which is financed through the revenue through tax base is the most tangible of these outcomes, right? If you create a job in St. John, that's great. It doesn't necessarily mean that those individuals that have that job live in St. John. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to see that direct revenue back to the city. And with population growth, a little bit different. They're going to be living in St. John if there's population increase in St. John. So it is worth mentioning. The only other thing that I'd like to mention is that economic development, more broadly speaking, has had a pretty significant shift in the last 5 to 10 years. When I first started in the public sector, everything was around business attraction, investment attraction, a lot of work around that.
More recently, the discussion is around the availability of talent, as you just heard from our first speaker. And that's becoming a new player in this discussion around economic development and growth. And that's where population growth comes in, of course, as well. I am going to share 3 stats. I do want to be honest with how we approach this from a growth committee standpoint in the open session. We love to celebrate our successes. We love to stand up tall when we've succeeded and we have accomplishments. We're very proud of our city and the growth efforts that we do. However, we will not shy away from sharing the stats that we think this committee needs to know. We will not do that. We will not be a marketing-based presentation every time we're here, nor do we want you to think that. So sometimes we will share stats that are probably not great to hear, but it's better for you to know about it because we would rather that than the alternative. So this first one is around tax-based growth. The dotted line is St. John. Everything above that is Fredericton and Moncton, as well as all the communities outside of St. John. So it's no surprise that St. John has experienced some growth. You'll see that trend going up. And more recently, we are having really strong outcomes that are coming out of our development community and from construction. So that is all very positive. However, there is a continued understanding that other growth is happening at a faster pace than in St. John. So I believe we're catching up to it, but it is important to acknowledge that at this stage. The other thing that this stat doesn't show is how we're growing. And I'm just reminded of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting that happened last night. One of the comments from Councillor Sullivan, who indicated that that particular development is one of that is indicative of smart growth, where a lot of the growth is happening exactly where we would intend it to happen and are densely populated. So some of these stats might be deceiving. If there's a lot of growth in a lot of areas, you don't know if that's a whole bunch of new suburban or rural communities that are going to cost those municipalities a lot of money to provide those services to them. So we don't have that full picture. So one thing that we are committed to in St. John is that smart growth. Next one is on population growth, and I know we started this discussion on population growth as being the only CMA in Canada that was experiencing population decline, which was a pretty serious situation, and that was at the bottom of that red line. And I think the real success story, and again, I'm not trying to brand or market here, is that we curbed it. And when I say we, I mean newcomers to St. John. That's who's curbed it. All population growth is originating from newcomers from other countries into St. John, and acknowledging that, understanding that, and indicating how we're going to support that is important for this committee. One of the things that you'll hear about, or you have heard about, is that we're vying to be the most welcoming community in Atlantic Canada, and that's certainly part of that brand that we're trying to achieve to attract more and more and retain those. The other important stat related to this is when we talk about the overall newcomers that come to our community and to our region, 85 to 87% of them decide that St. John is the location they want to go. Not Quispamsis, not Rothesay. So there's a natural inclination towards the density of St. John and the housing offerings that St. John offers versus those others. So that is a very positive component of St. John and newcomers. The last one is on labor force. It is just worth mentioning that St. John has a very different labor force base than Fredericton and Moncton, key comparators to ours. Our community is much more private sector driven. Some of the steady growth that occurs in more public sector funded employment tends to come out of Fredericton and Moncton, but we have a much more fluctuating economy premised on all that private sector export markets and commodities that would be dealt with through the St. John market. Yeah, I'll move on from there. So I've talked to you about the outcomes of growth, and now I'd like to talk to you about what levers we have as a municipality in order to stimulate those. And when I share these, I'd encourage you to think about it. I think about it as a staff. So these are my roles as staff to support this as somebody who's delivering growth. But also, I'd like you to consider it on how you as growth committee members can contribute to these as well and support it and think critically and provide new direction on it. So one of the most natural ways that we can support growth is where do we spend our money? How do we spend our money, both on the operating budget as well as the capital budget? They're excellent opportunities to invest and determine where is that best bang for your buck as it relates to growth development. We also have, as a growth committee, the reserve fund that supports the growth reserve fund, that supports growth initiatives, that the growth committee does really provide guidance to council on how to spend those funds. A lot of it right now is focused on economic and community recovery, but it is one of those avenues. The next one is customer service, and I know that might not seem as a growth outcome, but it absolutely is. How we interact with those that want to do business in St. John is a key facet of how we can stimulate growth and encourage growth. And again, use that filter of, you might think of customer service as the one-stop development shop or our integrated customer service, but it absolutely is also the interactions that council members have with the community as well, and what's your role in stimulating and encouraging that growth. The next one is quality of life. This is one that the growth committee in the past has for those with some continuity in the committee are aware of. We've probably had less focus on quality of life, but it is absolutely central to our value proposition as a community. Why people stick around, why people want to be here, and part of that competitive advantage that we can produce as a community. The programs that fall under that are a variety. I'm not going to go through all of them, but we have the Sunshine program happening now, the community grants, arts grants, neighborhood and community center agreements, Pro Kids, Sport Liaison, park program, arts and culture, all this stuff, events booking, all that stuff plays into this quality of life a mantra or this belief that we're trying to achieve. And it doesn't impact everybody. Maybe everybody doesn't book an event, but maybe everybody attends an event. Maybe not everybody plays sports, but they know somebody that does play sports. So it plays into that, and our ability not to produce that would also have an impact. Next one is development, and similar to customer service, but also we seek and encourage development in different ways. Evidently, one of them is our investment into Envision St. John that supports strategic real estate development. But we also have our own development incentive program, which incents those developers to develop in particular areas of the community that we think are pertinent. We also support development through strategic capital investments into where we know there's an abundance of need or where we think there will be an abundance of need. So those are strategic investments at the capital level through development. The last one on this slide is partnerships. And if you remember the council orientation that Jacqueline provided, 55% of just our department's budget goes to outside agencies and organizations. So $8.5 million of our own departmental budget, and that's just one department, goes to these agencies. So we're talking about facilities or regional facilities, we're talking about Envision, we're talking about all the grants that are provided into the community. There is a huge network of groups that help us achieve our growth outcomes. It is not just city staff, it is not just Envision St. John or the businesses in our community. There is a large network. There's three others that I wanted to touch up on. One which you might initially say, oh, that's interesting. Why would you have compliance and enforcement in that list? But our approach is certainly the carrot and the stick. You can't have one without the other. If we're incenting particular types of behavior, we also have to hold our ground on the type of behavior that is unacceptable in our community, that our codes or our bylaws or policies indicate are just not right. Because how would you want to build a brand new house and then next door, your next door neighbor is doing nothing and causing and not fulfilling the expectations of simple home ownership on their end. The other one is communications and engagement. How we promote, how we share our story is one that I think is very important. This is an area that we've indicated in the past that we want to do a better job at. We have to be more intentional with it, and how we expand that to outside markets as well as to our own market. Lastly, and another one that we probably have had less involvement in at the Growth Committee, but again, a growing area, is diversity, access, and inclusiveness. This was bolstered obviously recently with the population growth framework as wanting to be the most welcoming community in Atlantic Canada. But there's a whole variety of interactions that fall under that. The Ability Advisory Committee supports the Pro Kids Succeed and Stay project, the Local Immigration Partnership, Affordable Housing Action Plan. All these different facets kind of contribute to this diversity, access, and inclusiveness, amongst a whole bunch more, which will contribute as well to quality of life. Okay, I have a quote there around plans, and I want to just quickly discuss plans. I'm not sure what the committee feels about plans or what your perceptions are about plans. I can be honest that some people do think that plans we have too many of them. They pick up dust, or they're good intention, but we don't see them implemented. As a staff, I think this is a major tool that we have for successful reaction and strategy as it relates to opportunities and challenges we face as a community. It's the way we communicate to the community on what we're doing about it, essentially. And one of the things I wanted to share with you as it relates to our plans is that our plans are quite different than what a stale plan might feel or you might experience. Most plans that we're developing now are based on collective ownership. It's not the city's own responsibility. When you're facing the challenges that governments and communities are facing, you're not expected to solve them yourself. You're bringing everybody in. So that's one. Each plan that I've been involved with through growth have always had detailed action plans that drive what it is we're going to do, and they are tracked. So there is an expectation of implementation. Most plans have a budget or post-implementation budget tied to them in order to entice that continued momentum. And each plan has measures and KPIs to make sure that we're on track, that everybody knows about, so that we can be held accountable. Mostly, all plans build this new level of ownership in the community and our stakeholders to take on that level of support towards that opportunity or challenge. So I'm not going to go through each one of these plans. Your council orientation had quite a bit of this already, but it is worth noting that each one of these plans have a collective that's built around it, of people that care for it deeply, that are not city staff, that are not council members, they're in our community. And that's a very important piece. They're part of this community, and they're growing over time. The other one is that they still remain very relevant, these plans. They may be getting older, but they've shown their ability to adapt. They've seen their ability to stand up when it's time to stand up. And I think that's an important thing to think about as we go through. So I'm not going to go through, fairly well about Plan SJ. The other piece is that we haven't really done what I would call a deeper dive into some of these plans, into what it means. Some of you may have received it over time, but not everybody has. So that is an opportunity in the future to think about these plans in new ways that you may receive more information on if you'd like. Play SJ, of course, is another one of those plans, but I'm not going to take this presentation to dive into that level of detail. These two plans I just want to briefly touch up on. The roadmap was really a starting point for the city to define its priorities and its expectations related to growth. I'm not going to go through everything. It is really a plan that I believe is completed. It is not something that it has not been renewed. And really economic development is really something that is now sourced heavily into Envision St. John to lead. And that's similar to the population growth framework, which that is an area that the Envision St. John would be leading in the go-forward basis, which is not to be confused with the city's responsibility to be a welcoming community, and the city's responsibility of holding the local immigration partnership and to eventually create an immigration strategy, which is really premised on retaining those individuals new to our city into the community. The secondary plan for the Central Peninsula is the first secondary plan that we've taken on. I can't say this enough that we're just so excited with the momentum that has been created in the Central Peninsula. I think in part by this strategy, among others. And I think this will be a really good example for other neighborhoods in our community on how to approach this and what worked very well in this process. But I also don't want to state that this one's over. This is not a passive plan. This is still a living document and a living plan that continues to be needed to be implemented in order for it to succeed. Envision St. John, I wanted to touch up on that quick. You may be aware that we've had reform in the economic development area for many years. I think at one time I counted that there was 10 plans over 10 years to reform economic development, so it's an ongoing cycle. And I am personally believe that we've really achieved a milestone and goal that we never thought we would, which is a truly regional model encapsulating all those key facets of externally sourced economic development. And it's something to be proud of. We also need to give them the space to create their strategic plan and to establish their priorities as an organization, and something very much that we're looking forward to into the future. These are just a few of the partners that we'd work with, more specifically on the economic development front on our growth, but this is not restricted to this. There's a whole bunch of quality of life related partners that we would have in addition to those in this as well. So I wanted to define a little bit around Growth Committee's role and what's the best approach into supporting Growth Committee as a committee member. I think becoming a growth ambassador, thinking about how you can support growth is a great opportunity. Making those connections, staff are in the weeds. That's what we do. We have to get in the weeds. We're expected to. And sometimes we might miss the broader forest, and that's important for the Growth Committee to play that lens and say, have you missed something here? Can we help you support this? I think it's important for you to share with staff members, what is it that you need to know? What is it that we know that you don't know, or stuff that we both don't know that this committee needs to be briefed up on? Maintain the relevancy and the implementation of those strategies. Also giving staff the space to do the research, analysis, and recommendations for the committee's recommendations. I think that's also really important. That's more on the city staff's role. We'll come to you informed, evidence-based, with recommendations, but give us that space to do that particular work is something that I think is important for the committee as well. And then continuous improvement. We're all in the business of continuous improvement, so there might be things that we've not done that could have been a little bit better. Let us know about it. Let us know how we can do this better, or other groups or other initiatives. We're always in that business. We do have a 2021 Growth Committee work plan that was presented to the former Growth Committee. I'm not going through this extensively. I think you'll know the big ticket items that we have in that, but we have inputs to our KPIs. The Succeed and Stay program is still ongoing. Economic and community recovery, city market strategy, affordable housing strategy are all basically going to be onboarded this year. They won't necessarily be completed this year, but they are initiating. I think it's going to be a really exciting time to be part of a growth committee, personally. On the horizon, outside of those plans that I just shared and those strategies and those milestones, there's also the next neighborhood plan will likely happen in the next four years. A 10-year review of Plan SJ, Play SJ, Master Plan for Rockwood, and just the management of the growth momentum that we have currently is another massive piece. And we are wrapping up here. I have one more slide, and then we'll open it up for questions. The last slide is related to what information we received from the former council or growth committee as it relates to advice to this committee. So we thought it was really relevant to share that with you. I'm not going to go through this whole list, but some of the real important pieces that we felt came out of this was defining success for growth and for you, and making sure that you make that aware to the committee is one that is very important. The understanding that growth is not something that can be accomplished by this committee, but that partners are required, so forging those relationships and sustaining those relationships. So that's that list. I think I'll stop there and open it up for our questions if there are any.
Thank you, Chair. Phil, just a quick question. I think it's probably not something that you're going to answer today, but just something that, you were talking about what are those pieces that we need to be briefed on. I've heard some numbers suggested on these in the past, but it would be really valuable for the Growth Committee to see how underfunded some of these plans are that are so important. I look at something like Play SJ. I've heard multiple numbers going around. It's really hard to achieve and to know what a smart, as you were talking about, what a smart growth goal would be for some of these. And I know for my role as the chair of the Strategic Planning Committee, to look at where are we really suffering from a lack of resources to realize the goals and to realize what we're trying to do on some of these plans. Because I think you're right, they're crucial and they're important to help drive us to where we're trying to go, of course. But it's hard to wrap my mind around in this role as well as others, where are we missing the dart? It's not always our fault for sure. There's a resource shortage. We've seen that as council looking with the municipal reform piece right now, trying to fight for our piece on that. So anyway, just something to take away. And I don't know if you or the city manager has thoughts on that, but thank you.
Chair, through you to the councillor, you bring up an excellent point, Councillor Harris. I think we have to recall that when a number of these plans were developed, they were developed in a time where the growth rate in the city was significantly higher than it currently is. And they were developed in a time where capital expenditures in the city numbered in the neighborhood of $50 to $60 million a year. Now we're down around $12 to $15 million a year. So we are in a completely different financial environment. That is one of the main reasons why we suggested last year, and it's part of the work plan, that we in fact developed this 10-year strategic plan and you're chairing the advisory group for. That 10-year strategic plan will then inform the resourcing that needs to occur. Because right now, all of the plans, pick any one of them, there's not a one of them that is affordable. We cannot fund everything that is in all those plans, certainly not in the next 10-year horizon. So by getting that 10-year strategic plan and getting that sort of long-range outlook, the staff will then be able to go back through the Play SJs and the Plan SJs and all of the, for example, master plans for the various parks and refocus that with the current new financial reality and really put our money to best effect. So that work will follow out of the strategic plan because right now it is necessary because we simply do not have enough money to fund everything that is within those plans. What we have been quite good at over the past couple of years, however, is prioritizing within those plans. And I'll take Rockwood Park as an example. The Rockwood Park master plan is many, many, many millions of dollars, but it's broken down into 4 stages so that we can deal with one stage at a time. We kind of need to take that approach with all of the work that we're doing. And we've done a pretty good job of that in terms of looking at things within Plan SJ, the Central Neighborhood Plan, et cetera. More work to be done as soon as we get that 10-year strategic plan in place. Thank you.
Myself, actually. So just looking at your tax-based growth slide, which goes right to 2016. So I guess we haven't really seen the tax-based growth impact based on that particular slide when it comes to the growth committee's activities as it was started in 2016. So I'm wondering if maybe we, as a committee, could get an updated slide on the tax-based growth piece. Because I'm just looking at sort of those three pillars: jobs, population, tax-based growth. And to me, it seems like we have the most control over tax-based growth. And retention is noted as well in your slides as well, Phil. And I'm just wondering, is that a metric that we could be sort of measuring better in how do people stay?
Chair, I'll deal with the first question, let Phil handle the second one. We do have the accurate, up-to-date figures on tax-based growth, and Finance Committee reviews them quite regularly. Last year was an abnormal year, of course, because of COVID, but it was also an abnormal year because the province changed some of the tax exemptions that used to occur. So we actually got a bump, or an increased bump in our tax rate. Just for general awareness for today, if you take a look at the 3-year rolling averages for tax base, because in any one year, you can get a blip up or a blip down. If you take a look at the last 2 years, 2 years ago, the 3-year average for tax base growth was 1.36. Last year, the 3-year average increased to 1.58. But again, part of that was due to the tax exemption changes that were made. We will know the tax base growth for next year, that will be used for our budgets for next year in the late October, November timeframe is when the tax base growth figures are released for the current year of 2021.
Oh, nice. It's a great question, and I think it is really important to differentiate between outcomes and performance. And that's something that you will not hear from staff. A great example, I'll pick on Amy Poffenroff. She could come and say, we had the best July in the last 40 years, and it's all my doing. And she could say that, we're putting building permits through like no other, and there's 2,000 new units, and she could try to claim all that it's our shop. It is so much more complicated than that. So I think we've got to look at those outcomes as kind of like end of the line outcomes. It's like it's because of all these different little facets that are happening, and then we need to zero in on what it is that we can influence. So when I shared that kind of secondary slide on the levers, the performance, that's where we need to become really good at. So what's our turnaround times? What's our development incentive program doing? What's our quality of life programming looking like these days? How are people reacting to it? That's the type of thing that we do have control over and that we will celebrate and we'll measure. But we won't come here and try to claim that those outcomes, we'll say, partially, like I used it when we talked about population growth. I think we had a role in it. A reason for families from particular parts of the world to come move here was not because of Phil Willett. It wasn't because of a council, right? There's a whole bunch of reasons behind it. But did we have something to do with it? Yes. And then the second question, which is much more complicated, is what's the extent of that influence? So what is the extent of turnaround times as it relates to the development? I'm not sure how much of an influence it plays. We know it has an impact, and that becomes another type of question that we can use. So I think it's a great question. I think we've got to continue monitoring the outcomes and say, are we actually shifting something? And then we can also shift the things that we're working on to improve those outcomes. So everything it can be fluctuating, but as long as we say, yeah, those 3 things, they should be growing, and we'd like to see those 3 things growing, that gives us a starting point to then produce some policy and some programming.
Yeah, I would just hate staff to have to be, it would take one call center closing for the jobs metric to be totally thrown off, and that's not in your control. So I just would love us to work on things that we can control. That's the point of my question. So thank you both. All right. Is there any other? So I have water in here. Is there any other questions, comments from the committee? So I'm going to move to receive and file this report here. Moved by Councillor McKenzie, seconded by Councillor Lowe. All right. Moving on is the most sort of informal part of the meeting today. So what we're going to do is go around. Unfortunately, Mayor Reardon had to leave us at 1 p.m., but we are going to go around the committee and ask a couple of questions about, why we're here. It's a very exciting committee to be on and to be involved in some of the most active files that the city is working on. So I'm going to start at this end for the first question, and then I'll start with Councillor Lowe on the next question. So first question is, what are the key reasons you wanted to become involved in the Growth Committee? So Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair Killam. For me personally, I'm a grassroots kind of guy in the city, I guess. Started a couple of businesses in my past, not all of them here. So I've had a chance to live in Hamilton. I've had a chance to live outside Toronto. I've had a chance to do a little bit of entrepreneurial work outside of the city. And coming here and getting involved more in a community level as a community advocate. It's mostly around housing in my past and starting a social enterprise here out of that. I just got to see some differences of how we do things here in the city and what the inertia is behind things and what momentum happens. And so I think that perspective of living elsewhere, seeing how they do things, seeing the successes they have, and then coming here and seeing, also, I have to say, I was just inspired. It was besides seeing some of the holdbacks that we have here that are different, that you don't see in a place like Hamilton, or I know they're bigger cities, but even when I lived in Port Perry, Ontario, seeing some of the success. When I left here in 2012 and coming back in 2016, it was a different city, completely different city. There was more energy. There was more people. One of my friends said it best. It's like almost a bunch of us left, a bunch of people left, and then new people came, or we came back, and then everybody wanted to start something new. It was like there was new things happening, there was new initiatives and organizations, and they didn't exist before. And there was buy-in from the citizens before. We used to joke and say that people in St. John were so cynical. But when I came back, people were positive. And so that kind of inspired me to get involved in the community at the grassroots level as an entrepreneur, but also with in an advocacy role. And seeing this growth committee mandate really jived well. So those would be, I guess, the two main things for me.
Excellent. Thank you, Councilor McKenzie.
Thank you. I guess for me, growth is the number one thing for the city of St. John right now. Without it, we're not going to go very far. So we need to grow in a big way, and that's what I'm interested in working toward. I enjoy interacting with developers and talking about, the possibility of different things happening on different sites, and then sometimes you see that actually come to fruition. So that's kind of nice. But that's where my interests are right now, trying to grow St. John, grow the tax base, provide better services to a bigger population. Thank you.
Free lunch, number one, right, like you mean. Number two is, I've been around for a long while. I built a housing development up there where they say I couldn't build one in Rockland Road, and I built a bunch of old buildings, did them all over. I just get turned off when developers spend a lot of money and people nickel and dime them. And a lot of them don't have 5 cents and never put 5 cents in building anything. And I see that in this city, and I've seen it for a long time. And I spent 8, 9, 10 years in PAC, and I was on the growth committee before I took my sabbatical to Fredericton for a couple of years. But I just think that we should appreciate builders, big builders, more instead of nickel and diming some of the things that they're doing. And this growth committee, I'm all for tearing buildings down that they can't be fixed If they can be fixed, they should be fixed. But to have buildings stand here for days and weeks and months, and we get city stuff around them for danger, and they're still standing here, and I don't buy that, and it's not right. And if they can't be fixed and they're danger to the ordinary public that's walking by them, they should be brought down. And this committee gets involved in all that. I kind of love the idea about the 4 things that Amy's department doing about new developments, when we see them, all that, because most of them are street smart stuff. I mean, most of the stuff we've heard about, we know about, but to see that department put it in writing, I like that. So the free lunch and dealing with everybody is why I got on, or why I want to get on it.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. For myself, it is really about seeing this city grow in a way that includes everyone, and from the developer right to the person who may have moved here as a result of some awesome campaign that Envision or our growth department has run. We want this city to be a place that people want to be. And I think that really will help influence growth, because, you know, who doesn't want to be the one to go to the cool kids party, AKA our city. So I really just think that all the things that they do, that it's obviously very, very complicated what this department does. So we need to be the champions and supporters of all that hard work and help guide and give influence where we should and can. So I really appreciate the diverse sort of old and, well, not old, no one's old, but the former councillors, the ones who have been here with the incumbents, with the brand new folks like myself. So I truly appreciate the mix as well that we have here on the Growth Committee, and I think we're going to do some wonderful things together. So on to the next question, which Councillor Lowe, you're going to kick this off, is what additional presentations, informations, or discussions would you like as part of your orientation into Growth Committee? Anything we're missing?
Not really. I mean, I was sitting in that other room in there, and here, I've seen a lot of changes. I mean, like I said, I've been gone for a couple of years, and I was on the Growth Committee before. And I think the changes that we're doing now are positive, much greater, more explanatory than the ones where I was on before. I mean, it's only our first day, so we got to find out what we're going to do and who we're going to fight with and who we're not going to fight with. But I think we're definitely on the right course, right, like me.
Thank you. One of the things that I'd like to see going forward is an opportunity for a project wrap-up. Like, I'd like to have a developer come in after doing his project and say, look, here's where you guys did really, really well. Here's where I would see, if I was doing another project, where we could improve. And then we could say, okay, so you know, we know where not to waste our energy because we're doing really well over here, but we know where we can focus some energy on these things. I'd like to see that going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I got 3 that I would like. Well, the first one, I have to say right off the top, having campaigned mostly on housing, being a builder, not a big builder, but being a small scale builder with 3-4 person construction team, having worked around the city, and also having partnered with our land bank and a local community center to try to rehab one of these buildings that Councilor Lowe pointed out in the past. I would love to get a orientation or some sort of briefing around Local Governance Act, Section 137 specifically, because outline in that, and to Councillor Lowe's point, it gives cities a mandate, an opportunity to go in and repair. Yes, you pass on the cost to the next developer, but we have an interesting overlap here with the St. John Land Bank and its role in being able to forgive some of that tax, in being able to free some of those land parcels up and some of those buildings. And 97 Victoria is a perfect example of a missed opportunity in my mind on a building that could have gone differently. And we had 40 some odd volunteers, 3 organizations working hard on this thing. And it was tragic that it caught fire. No one's fault, right? I mean, besides the people who started the fire, but it's just an example. These are dangerous buildings. They, broken windows theory tells us that they they produce crime. They don't just they're not just unsightly. They actually are some of the main contributing factors to increased crime in neighborhoods, which disproportionately affects those living in poverty. And so we've seen it firsthand. We've seen it go wrong here. We've seen that there's the public who want to be involved with things like this. They're willing to give up their time to try to go in and fix a building that's not theirs, that they're never going to live in, for one of their neighbors to have the opportunity to live in. And I personally, I know that I have a vested interest in that because that's part of my little side piece here, what I do outside of these chambers. But now I'm here, and I think we have an opportunity to capitalize on some of that local mobility. And I would love to know what provisions we have, why we haven't pursued some of these opportunities to pass on the cost, upload the cost of repair. Anyway, that's a little bit of a long tangent, but that one for sure around Local Governance Act, Section 137, I think would be awesome. I know that would probably come from Amy's office. So I'll pass that. Another one on would be another question for briefing would be development cost charges. So the City of Moncton just passed a bylaw passing on development cost charges to developers for their new developments so that we can spread the cost out, get it away from the city. I know, there's a famous city councillor in Toronto that would do this in meetings, pound her fist, and say that the City of Toronto is not going to pay for, all these services to be delivered, that they need to be passed on to developers, and that we cannot be scared away. We can't be scared of losing development and losing energy by doing the right thing for the taxpayers that have been here and been putting in the work. So I would love to know where we stand with potential development cost charges. And then finally, I think I would love to get a briefing on developing stronger recruitment for our ABCs. So, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on what they are, but our boards, our commissions, and agencies, sorry. How we mobilize the community to serve on those boards, because, that really is, those are our think tanks. And I know for me, as somebody who's worked on the outside, and I have friends who are working on all sorts of things, interesting things, inspiring things, they don't even know about some of these ABCs and what's going on with them and who they're looking for. So I'd just like to know if there's, what is our plan for that? What are we doing on that front? How are we trying to recruit and grow our ABCs? Because it really is our think tank. And there's a lot of very smart people in the city that, I know that are not currently involved in these conversations that we really could leverage. So those would be my three. I know that was long-winded, but thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Okay, so for my answer, it sort of builds a bit on what John was saying. I think that we could have a really, as part of the Growing in St. John series, a voice of the customer. We talk a lot about how we're here to serve, to provide good customer service. So to hear some of those stories from the community, like your tier 1, 2, or 3 in our building, growth initiatives, like how was it building a deck? How was it building a house in our city? Because I think that, the easier we make it for folks, the more stories we know, the easier we're going to have with retaining people and making them feel like they're being heard, listened to, and incorporated into future plans. So I really would love to hear more from those that have used our system. I believe in human-centered design and think that voice of the community is really important when it comes to how we make moves going forward. So I love the presentation idea that we have already going, and it'd be neat to see it from other sort of user groups as well. Okay, so that's true.
My fingers are always too cold today. Madam Chair, I need to piggyback on something Councillor Harris mentioned, because quite frankly, we have a good news story to celebrate today. When it comes to nominations, people submitting their names to ABCs, and Councillor Harris, this is not to detract from your point. We fully agree we need to do more. But we were averaging about 3 applications a month, 3 names that would come in. Just with a little bit of advertising, a little bit of concerted effort over the last week and a bit, we received 25 applications for this current round of positions that are empty. So we can make a difference here, and we can energize that community more. And I think the last week has shown us that with a very positive response from the community. Now, not all of those files, of course, are meet the selection criteria, but just the fact that we were getting more people expressing an interest, I think we can leverage moving forward. But it was a very positive news story, or positive news over this past week in terms of the number of people who stepped up. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, can I have a motion to receive and file this feedback for staff and city manager? Motion by Councillor or Deputy Mayor McKenzie, seconded by Jerry Lowe. Okay, moving on. So our next item is the item 1.5, 2022 capital expenditures, quality of life. This is with City Manager John Collin.
I'm here today just to give you a very quick information update, a heads up, if you will, on something that the staff have been working on for quite some time, and that will be formally presented to Finance Committee tomorrow. And the reason it's being presented to Finance Committee is they are the lead committee for anything to do with budgetary considerations, be they capital or be they operating. You are aware that we have an opportunity this year in that we have received information whereby our gas tax funding that we get from the federal government will double from $4 million and change to approximately $8 million and change. So therefore, there is $4 million or so that was unaccounted for within our capital program. That's tremendous news for the city. That money is designed or is intended to be used, and I quote, the funding program is for the construction, renewal, or material enhancement of infrastructure within communities, end quote. So with that, we have an opportunity here, and we also believe as staff that it is time to start using some of our normal capital funding for quality of life and community initiatives as well. Therefore, we will be going to Finance Committee tomorrow with a recommendation to amend our asset management policy to add in some criteria whereby quality of life initiatives can make it above the funding line. Because right now, most of our criteria are risk-based criteria, and of course, the risk of underground utilities collapsing is greater than improving a park, for example. So we are going to seek finance's support for changes to the asset management policy, which of course will then go to council for due consideration to enable quality of life initiatives to make it higher up the possibility for funding. We are also going to go to Finance Committee with some specific selection criteria for this $4 to $6 million that we would have available between the gas tax funding and a modest sliver off of our normal capital program. If we get the support of Finance Committee tomorrow in terms of just general comments, we will then go through the normal approval process, which includes a consultation period with Growth Committee, and then also consideration by council as a whole as to whether or not the staff recommendation would be part of our 2022 capital program. And if it is, we could see significant changes to the tune of $4 to $6 million in terms of quality of life initiatives within the city of St. John. Now, quality of life initiatives are poorly defined. In fact, there is no real definition for what a quality of life initiative is. So just for your orientation, what we're really speaking about here are improvements to our parks and our recreational facilities, improvements to our green spaces, beautification, active transportation. Those are really the areas in which we can focus in to some degree on infrastructure. Anyway, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is a heads up for today. The first step in the process is a discussion with Finance Committee tomorrow, since they are the keepers of the key for capital budgets. And depending on the comments we receive there, if there is general support, we'll move it forward through the process from there on. I mentioned it to Growth Committee today because, of course, these sorts of initiatives do have an impact on growth within a community. We know that. There are more and more people who choose the community in which they wish to live based on the quality of life infrastructure that is available within that community. So should this move forward, I think it is very exciting news in terms of enhancing our growth proposition, our value proposition to not only our current community, but those who may consider St. John in the future. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions you may have, but again, it's just really a heads up for today. There will be more discussion on this later. Councilor,
Yeah, just to pile on a little bit, we have a working definition of quality of life, which is very similar. I think it'd just be helpful to share with the committee what we're using is investments that fall within the responsibilities and authority of local government that contribute to the wellness, livability, and vibrancy of the community. Quality of life investment should seek to bring people together, build connections, and contribute to the enjoyment our residents experience through municipal assets.
Yeah, quick question through you, Chair, to the city manager. What do we have a financial policy in place right now? And it doesn't sound like we do, but if we don't, I mean, that governs new income that comes in. If we don't, would it be worthwhile to have one from the Finance Committee on, all of a sudden we find, I'm thinking of the municipal reform piece. Let's say the province hits us a home run, we end up with $15 million more next year. Do we have anything in place that starts to, siphon that off and say, okay, 2% of that we know goes there based on our policy, 17% goes here? Just curious.
we don't have a specific policy that says, what do we do with new money? What we do have, though, is a very robust suite of financial policies that would guide this council as to what they could do with that new money. So, for example, our capital budgetary policy makes it quite clear that any money you put towards capital, be it new or old money, 85% of it must go towards renewing existing infrastructure and 15% can go towards new. That's one example. Another example is within our operating policy, you cannot use one-time money to fund operating costs. It's contrary to policy, and it only makes sense because if you fund it 1 year, it begs the question, what do you do the next year when you don't have that money anymore? So there are, I think I can speak quite confidently and say our current financial policies will be able to cater to the possibility that municipal reform or anything else could provide more funding to the city. We would take a look at it and within the context of the suite of financial policies, come forward to council with recommendations. And those recommendations will very much be guided also by council's priorities that will be developed over the next month, a month to 2 months, but also the 10-year strategic plan that's also being developed between now and Christmas.
There are no more questions. We will make a motion to receive and file. Okay, moved by Brent Harris, okay, seconded by John McKenzie. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, moving on to 1.6. It is over to Amy Poffenroth with our our development update.
All right, thank you. Members of Growth Committee, I just want to give a brief update on development activity within the last month. We're looking at our mid-year numbers as of the end of June, and a strong construction season so far. Our permit construction value is at almost $42 million. It's about average over the last 10 years. We are above average in the number of building permits issued to date at just under 400. And the real interesting story is around our number of residential units created. So as of the end of June, we're at 182 units created. That is 2.5 times the average over the last 10 years or so. Very significant, and activity in the residential sector that we haven't seen for a very long time. We do have a number of major projects under permit review right now. We have about 5 that are currently under review, including a 60-bed nursing home at the Shenex complex in Milledgeville. And we've had a number of large projects that have gone through the formal planning approvals. and are awaiting building permit applications. And with these projects that are sort of in the queue and waiting for the next stage of review and applications, it continues our strength on residential density with a potential for, well over 500 units in the coming months or years as these projects come to fruition. So really great news on the residential and density front there. With respect to notable construction activity underway, I'll just highlight some of the larger projects that are under construction right now. Work is continuing on the St. John Nonprofit Housing Project on Wellington Row. We're active construction at 365 Main Street. That's a 28-unit building in the north end. Work is continuing into the final phases of construction for the Telegraph building on Canterbury Street. Construction is well underway and moving along very well on the project at Wentworth Street. We have a foundation permit issued at 819 Millage Avenue. That's a multi-residential project there. 78 units at Calabria on the east side is nearing completion, and there is an upgrade work at Irving Pulp and Paper at Mill Street. So as you can see, a lot of activity at all areas of the city, which is really great news and good to see. And that is the very brief update on development activity.
Amy, is there any questions? Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is great news. We have a lot of growth and it's all positive. I wonder if there's anything that we can do though, because I find that a lot of our bike lanes and sidewalks are obviously getting a lot of gravel and stuff on them. So and that's part of the whole process, I know. I mean, that happens, but I mean, is there some way that we can partner with developers and have them cleaned up more often? I saw a guy almost wiped out on a bike the other day because of some gravel that a truck had left behind.
Yes, through the chairperson to the deputy mayor. This is an issue that happens when there's active construction sites. And we do work with developers to have those issues cleaned up if they're not aware of them or perhaps aren't tidying things up as quickly as we would like to see. So certainly encourage anybody to call the customer service center to advise if they see those sorts of issues at construction sites in their area, and we would be happy to contact the developers and work with them to get those cleaned up as quickly as possible.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, so I'm going to move to receive and file the development update. Can I get okay, motion by Deputy Mayor McKenzie, seconded by Brent Harris. All those in favor? Any naysayers? No? Okay. Now I take a motion to adjourn. Okay, Councillor McKenzie, seconded by Brent Harris, Councillor Harris. All right. Thank you all very much and hope you have a great day.